AIA California started this toolkit to help AIA components organize disaster response and recovery efforts to help their architect members and firms in rebuilding their communities. Because we are focusing on how components can function to support architects, we have 5 categories of activity. You may already know about FEMA's 4-phase cycle: preparation, response, recovery, and mitigation, but FEMA is a government agency and government does not rebuild. For architects, we made 5 stages of activity: readiness, response, recovery, and rebuilding and review. We will now give an overview of what is included in the toolkit for each stage. We have a brief introduction section in our toolkit to give some background and orientation. There you will find the phases and timelines of disasters, learn about different types of disasters, and the classification of disasters. Additionally, the resources available from AIA California are laid out. The toolkit is meant to be a time-sensitive resource so that components can turn to the section appropriate to their current situation. So you don't have to start at the beginning, you can just go right to what you need. Each disaster has its own time frame. Readiness should occur annually with training for component boards and executives. Response occurs in the immediate days after the disaster incident when the component becomes active, while life safety efforts are still in process. Some disasters are a one-day event, and some take a couple of weeks, like fires can last a couple of weeks. So response can take that long. Once the emergency responders and SAP evaluators leave town, the community shifts into recovery. This is a phase which includes months of planning and organizing for what to do to recover. Architects have a big role engaging with the community during recovery. Then follow years of rebuilding, where architects who may already have had a significant workload are managing their offices through the increased workload and really need chapter support. Finally, it is good for our chapters to review and celebrate the successes achieved, and we show how a case study can make a record of the chapter's success. Here are examples of some of the resources available from AIA California. There is an architectshelp.org website, a one-pager to give to community leaders. There is a day one box. There are grants, and there are various other resources AIA California can offer to help the component. This is pretty well spelled out in the introduction section of the toolkit, so be sure to take a look. Readiness is the annual effort that a component can make to be prepared and have some knowledge of what to do if a disaster occurs in their area. The first thing to do is to participate in a training such as this one to understand how to ensure component success and engagement with the community, as well as creating or reviewing and updating the business continuity plans. So 3 key elements: this training, the leadership outreach plan, and the business continuity plan. Let's look more specifically. Training, such as viewing this presentation, is the first element of readiness. AIA California wants every component to be prepared in case a disaster strikes in their area during the coming year. It is intended that all component board members and executives receive the training with onboarding and/or annually, and it is intended to become part of component certification. This presentation and the toolkit are available to all members and is intended to be updated as a living document as more experience is gained that can be helpful. There are 5 key elements for component readiness in California. At the beginning of each year, every component should, number 1, identify one member of the board or from the chapter to serve on the Disaster Assistance Network, which meets quarterly to share knowledge and experiences. 2, create a leadership outreach plan asking board members to make commitments at the beginning of the year to develop relationships with key community leaders and maintain open lines of communication with those leaders throughout the year. 3, create a day one strategy plan of what to do first, who will be the core team, where to meet, and who to meet with. 4, clearly define a day one communication plan outlining who will speak for the chapter. And 5, take a moment to review the success of the component in prior disasters and see if there is a completed effort that can be summarized into a case study to help others. Asking AIA chapter board members to make a commitment to community engagement throughout the year and to name the individuals and roles that they will reach out to is a key element of getting the component ready to respond if a disaster occurs. And also is a general help to remind community leaders of the role architects play in building and rebuilding the community. We have included an example sign-up sheet in the toolkit, as well as many great resources like elevator speeches, one-pagers, and the like to use in relationship building. At the moment of disaster, community leaders have to act quickly. They turn to the people and organizations with which they are most familiar. This fictional spreadsheet shows how a component can easily ask chapter leadership to commit to reaching out and maintaining a relationship between the chapter and the community leaders all year. Board positions should come with commitments which can align with their committee responsibilities. With these relationships being stimulated throughout the year, AIA architects will be more easily recognized and included in disaster response and recovery planning. The sooner we are at the table, the better it is for the community. And if no disaster occurs, the architects who make these efforts increase their professional relationships and improve recognition of the AIA chapter in the community. AIA National has prepared a new and detailed guidebook for preparing a business continuity plan. As part of chapter certifications, many components have a plan in place. However, it may have been based on older guidance and should get updated. AIA California provides an example of a continuity plan to assist in the second link below. Components can also let membership be aware they are updating the plan for the ongoing functioning of the chapter, and also that firms should have their own plan in place and that these resources are available to them to help. Disaster response is almost exclusively a function of government and key community-based organizations. Response happens in the immediate days during and after the disaster incident. Response is over so quickly, you will notice when the emergency vehicles leave town, there is a big shift towards recovery, logistics, and planning. Sometimes a disaster can be compounded by coincident or consequential disasters like a fire following an earthquake, mudslides coming after the wildfire, or COVID lockdown coincident with any kind of disaster. This can prolong the response phase. In the toolkit, we address 5 key things every component should be able to do in those first days. In this section, we will review these key elements in the toolkit. And this little chart just shows how various disasters can overlap and affect each other. As soon as possible after the disaster occurs, or maybe while it's still occurring if it's a big fire that's lasting a long time, assemble the core team to meet and review the day one plan. You can appoint a separate disaster recovery chair or co-chairs, as in Los Angeles, or the Disaster Assistant Network representative can fill that role. Assign tasks according to the plan and follow through. Here, next to the positions of the core team members, we indicate their suggested area of responsibility. The first order of business always is to conduct a safety check. Decide who will check in with the various component staff members, leadership, and architect members, and allied members. Also, figure out a way to get together members sooner than later to discuss the situation and chart a way forward. Either a meeting in general or a disaster recovery committee meeting, number one. As a community of architects, we are gutted by the devastation. Our life's work is turned to rubble, and our workload increases dramatically. Members need the camaraderie, the moment of shared grief, the support of the chapter in forging the way forward. This slide is not really in the toolkit, but I've added it here just to discuss some basic principles about what an architect can do during disaster. Government does not design or build buildings, but they are in charge of response. So somewhere along the line, disaster recovery has to pivot from government to private industry. They normally resist private industry as ambulance chasers, but the chapter can have great success in getting government to include them in the early efforts, which are the pro bono types of assistance we can give, where architects are volunteers to the cause. We can do safety assessments, man a table in the local assistance center, provide workshops to property owners, and participate in a myriad of committees involved with recovery planning and permitting issues. Architects' role in design is clear, and this is perhaps the first time property owners are coming with insurance funds to pay for services, so the relationship and timeframes are different. This is a good time to remind chapter members about reasonable expectations in design and in workload management. Construction administration in the disaster context is really super important, but it is often overlooked. Construction administration services, bidding and negotiation, contractor evaluations, contract review, those kinds of things are super important to help to protect the consumer and the money, so it goes into creating a new structure, not into fraudulent contractors' hands. Beware of insurance company recommended contractors. Restoration contractors have no quality control and they don't care about innovation or resilience. Emphasize the importance of having design professionals represent property owners' interests. The next step is to activate the community engagement network that component leaders have already established to ensure the AIA chapter can be involved in the response and recovery planning. AIA California is the point of contact for Cal OES to bring architects on board for safety assessment program surveys, so all requests and offers for that should go through the state organization. These have to happen quickly and will often involve SAP architects from other chapters. This is why we encourage architects to participate in SAP training in all chapters. We are preparing a short video from one of our members regarding earthquake SAP involvement. However, it is not ready yet. It's important also to understand the reason why you don't involve the local architects in the SAP evaluations is because they are so overwhelmed in this moment. Whether in collaboration with the local contractors association or independently, it is important to try and to have a table in the local assistance center, LAC or DAC, Disaster Assistance Center, as a volunteer association for a large-scale disaster. These LACs sometimes last a day or two, but sometimes they last 2 weeks, as in my community, or 4 weeks, as in Placer County in the Paradise Fire. The chapter has to ask nicely to be included and be on best behavior if they do allow you into the LAC. Property owners are relieved to have some professionals to talk with about their process of rebuilding and can then learn how architects can help them and protect them. They don't need to get a contractor first and let the contractor mandate everything in their project. In the LAC, the chapter must have waiver sign-in forms to protect volunteer architects from liability. We have an example of this in the toolkit. Also, the table should have generic business cards with the component logo and contact information. Architects cannot be in the LAC if they start handing out personal business cards. Architects cannot be ambulance chasers inside a government operation. just volunteer helpers. The chapter can include other chapters in the call to get volunteers for manning the AIA table in the LAC because the local architects may be overextended in this moment. A checklist for the LAC table as well as a simple waiver form are included in the toolkit and a template for making business cards that are more generic, that say either architectshelp.org or that say have the logo of the chapter. The first meeting of the Disaster Recovery Committee should occur as early as practicable during the response phase. It is important in the first meeting to first check in and connect with members, allow some sharing. Architects need to connect in this moment. Then, if there is an opportunity to man a table in the LAC, ask for volunteers and also discuss inviting adjacent chapters to help as well. Decide approximately what subcommittees that will be useful that members have a desire to participate in and identify at least one chair for each subcommittee. Close with various reminders to architects. Stay in your lane. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Remind architects to be clear about volunteer and business activities, and most importantly, everyone can use mental health support in this moment. Property owners, architects, staff, family, and friends. Disasters are a shock to the whole fabric of society. The recovery phase is when the rubber hits the road. It begins when the emergency responders leave town. The AIA component and its members can be helpful to the community in multiple ways. This section of the toolkit has three main areas of focus: the Disaster Recovery Committee, community outreach, and professional development. The Disaster Recovery Committee may meet only a few times because the members will be so busy. The chapter can support these efforts by making the collaboration between members in the different subcommittees easy and effortless, for example, with an online communication tool. For the second, third, and fourth meeting, the objective is to hear how efforts are going and to discover where the subcommittees need more support. These days, these meetings can be done online. You don't have to go anywhere. For example, the advocacy group may need more help from AIA California. The permitting committee may need more resources or advice from other chapters. There are example agendas and further suggestions in the toolkit. Here is an example of the base camp that was set up for AIA Redwood Empire disaster recovery subcommittees in order to communicate on an ongoing basis without having to send emails to everyone. These groups were active for several years, well into the rebuilding phase. Some of them were small with just a handful of members, and some involved people from other chapters and other organizations. Some members were involved in more than one subcommittee, and some subcommittees shared notes, and some subcommittees worked with outside organizations. For example, the housing subcommittee in AIA Redwood Empire evolved into a group called Homes for Sonoma and worked with several other CBOs, community-based organizations like Luther Burbank Housing, a nonprofit affordable housing CBO. There are multiple ways to organize workshops. The toolkit has many checklists and other resources to help with advertising and organizing.
Hi, I'm Kate Ryan, an architect in Santa Cruz, California, and a member of the AIA Monterey Bay chapter. In August 2020, a series of dry lightning strikes started severe wildfires across San Mateo and Santa Cruz counties that burned nearly 90,000 acres and destroyed more than 1,000 buildings before being fully contained over a month later. Our mountain communities were devastated, with entire neighborhoods wiped out overnight. Everyone was impacted and hurting. To make matters much worse, at the time, our community, like everyone's, was struggling with the pandemic, and COVID had just hit its peak in Santa Cruz. Shelters and services were severely restricted, and many homeowners were forced to leave the area to seek safe accommodation. But despite these conditions, local architects were committed to helping in any way that they could. In-person meetings and town halls were neither safe nor practical, so the architectural community had to come up with alternative ways to provide much-needed outreach and support. So we did this by switching to an online model. We set up a Rebuild Santa Cruz design team service where homeowners could reach out through online forms, emails, and social media for pro bono architectural support, which was then provided by one of our amazing team of architect volunteers. The service was highly successful, and we were able to quickly and efficiently connect with several impacted homeowners, helping them take their first steps towards recovery. Our outreach connected dozens of people with architects who would then go on to assist them in rebuilding, while also providing professional guidance to many, many more. It was popularly embraced, and more importantly, it did the job, allowing us to help at a time of need. The Monterey Bay AIA chapter was even recognized for our efforts, winning a national award for reimagining recovery. You can learn more about what we did and how we did it in the case studies portion of the AIA California's Component Disaster Response Toolkit. Thank you.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, it booted me out and I had to sign back on. But I'm gonna run it again. I don't know if y'all got to listen to Kate's video yet.
We were able to hear it.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna then back up a slide or two and see if I can get there. And then I'll play from here.
Build back better is generally the motto. More resistant, more hardened, less toxic, more energy efficient, and more sustainable. Contractors generally do not drive innovation and resilience and often complain even about building back to current codes. Only by getting in front of the property owners and helping them find a path forward can architects make them aware of all their options. This can be through one-on-one meetings, larger workshops, and through online meetings. To prepare the architects to bring the latest design thinking to the problems the community is facing, the component supports members by providing relevant and targeted continuing education during this phase and coordinating with various organizations providing the building expos. The component can most support professional development during recovery by bringing highly relevant educational seminars and facilitating community workshops and charrettes to address tough issues. We have a terrific case study in the resource section that covers the mudslide charrettes in Santa Barbara after the Thomas fire. And a video for this is also in the works. When the community starts rounding the corner into the rebuilding phase, lots are cleared of debris, the dust has settled, and the property owners are ready to begin design and rebuilding efforts. That is when the government activity recedes and private industry comes forward. The component supports firms and members by providing ongoing support with the committee activities, more community outreach, more professional development, and eventually showcasing rebuilding success. The typical custom home can sometimes take years to design. First, the owner acquires the property, then they can spend a year or two designing, they can bid with multiple contractors and take their time. Post-disaster rebuilding is different. Most property owners have never hired an architect. Quick decisions have to be made up front. Multiple pre-construction activities have to take place in the first few months. And insurance only allows a limited time to rebuild, like 12, 24, or 36 months to complete all phases and move out of the temporary rental. This is why all those advanced activities of the AIA component are so important for the effectiveness of the chapter and members. Otherwise, contractors will build less innovative, simpler structures and spend minimal time and effort on design and innovative solutions. The component helps architects to gather together, to learn, to get in front of property owners in need, and to bring the resilience and innovation to the table that is the latest thinking about building back better. Architects can also explain code upgrades and introduce better than code strategies. The component can continue supporting the architects in the rebuilding phase by making sure relevant information is available locally. And there are several committees that are involved with resilience and disaster at the state and national level. So there are a lot of resources. There is one aspect of disaster that is particularly challenging: losing a whole neighborhood. Architects can play a role in driving hope, and components can support members with additional resources like whole neighborhood white paper. Here is a inserted short presentation about how architects can help communities restore whole neighborhoods. Hello, I'm Julia Donahoe, an architect, attorney, general contractor in Healdsburg, California, and a member of the AIA Redwood Empire chapter. I'm going to give you a brief overview about the challenges of rebuilding whole neighborhoods, a gnarly problem that occurs in large-scale disasters. The Tubbs Fire in October of 2017 was a blowtorch across the landscape of Sonoma County, starting in the upper right of this map and burning into the heart of the city of Santa Rosa. Wildfires burn at 900 degrees, but homes provide more volatile fuel, so this fire got going really fast and had its own kind of microclimate inside of it, and it burned really hot, much hotter. And the result was that not just wildland-urban interface homes were lost, but also whole subdivisions. The objective for rebuilding is to get as many people to rebuild as possible so that the whole neighborhood can be restored. The path from devastation to rebuilding is not so easy. The national average for rebuilding is 25% at 5 years. Of course, we want it all to be beautifully designed, but some people just want their house back. Because architects got involved early in my community, we accelerated people's belief that they could rebuild however they wanted to rebuild, and that we would help them. We achieved 85 to 95% rebuilding in our densest neighborhoods. Most homeowners are homeowner buyers, not homeowner builders. They have never done this. In San Diego, after the Cedar Fire, an HOA neighborhood invited a group of different kinds of builders to meet with the homeowners together, and then they could sign up with more of a custom builder or a production builder. Stonefield Construction, who built 81 of their homes, is a production builder, and they have a division that only focuses on post-disaster rebuilds. They've become expert in this area. With a mix of builders and some HOA cohesiveness, the HOA got 95% rebuild of their neighborhood at 3 years, an outstanding statistic. A white paper about this topic is available in the toolkit. And it's really helpful to explain to contractors and homeowners and HOA boards why this is important and how it works. In Santa Rosa, we had 2 similar neighborhoods that were completely destroyed. Wickiup to the north is an HOA neighborhood with more than 170 production homes. That's like 5 floor plans and 3 elevation styles. And Larkfield Estates to the south was a neighborhood of custom homes on greater than 1 acre lots built in small tranches by different designers and builders. We invited Stonefield up to Santa Rosa to meet with the Wickiup HOA. Not to offend the local contractors, but there was plenty of work for our local contractors. We needed a method to get whole neighborhoods back. They signed up half of the neighborhood in one night. The next day, they put 80 contractor signs on 80 lots for similar homes that these people had before. And that drove hope. All of the rest of the homeowners then believed and found architects and contractors to meet the requirements. And most lots had contractor signs in a matter of a few weeks. Of course, they had to design something that would be cohesive within the community because it was an HOA community, but there still was some innovation going on there. Enthusiasm and hope grew and was infectious. Artfield Estates to the south followed, with those homeowners also getting signs on their lots, though a little more slowly because each homeowner had to find their own path forward with more innovative designs, architects, and contractors. Hope is contagious. In dense neighborhoods without an HOA, community organizing is necessary. In Coffey Park, the 1,700 workforce housing sites were divided into 5 sections. I made this map in the middle by visiting with the developers who had originally built these neighborhoods. So after the 5 sections were formed, leaders were selected for each section, and they met each week for months, and then monthly for still a couple of years. Each section then was divided into many small groups with block captains. This map was divided roughly according to the developers who built the neighborhoods, like I said, and those builders were encouraged to pursue rebuilding in those neighborhoods to the extent homeowners would like a similar house to what they had before. Those builders went to the original architects and engaged them to bring plans up to code. Homeowners still had a choice of working with architects to create more innovative designs since there was no design approval HOA process. So there is greater diversity in this neighborhood than before, but because of the community organizing, much more of the community got built back, and it was tracked every meeting. How many homes are in construction? How many homes have a building permit? How many homes are complete? They tracked that for several years and had fabulous success because there was this huge community drive to get people back home. The mix of methodologies, using production builders and using other kinds of builders, and then using this community organizing system to drive people to rebuild their home and help them, was that this community was rebuilt faster. Wow, at 2 years, almost every lot was in the queue going through this process. The blue dots in the map on the right show the houses that have building permits at 2 years. Architects can advocate in advance or after the disaster for legislative and code changes, and AIA California can help, but it is hard to create new methodologies for innovation, resilience, TDRs, managed retreat, low toxicity construction, and so forth in the moment of rebuilding. For example, our politicians wanted to change density in Coffey Park, but it was not possible. After the disaster, each lot is owned individually. The infrastructure like planning approvals, easements, roads, and utilities are in place. There is no mechanism or money for changing those items. Insurance does not pay for reworking infrastructure. It only pays to rebuild the structure. Instead, in our community, architects advocated for ADU expediting, ADU first policies, and increasing the time frame for rebuilding allowed by insurance. Los Angeles is already benefiting from this advocacy. Future disasters will benefit from the advocacy that comes out of the Los Angeles situation. I hope this inserted presentation has been helpful. Back to the regular presentation. It is really difficult for homeowners to navigate this process of rebuilding, especially if they've never done it before. They have never worked through a large insurance claim or hired architects, engineers, and contractors. Some have to enter as many as 20 different contracts to get their home back and restore their personal property. Architects are well-versed and skilled in helping homeowners navigate this myriad set of contracts and timelines and processes. It's more than design services that can be offered in this moment. It's really a holistic set of services that architects can deliver to homeowners and really help drive success in the community. Also in the toolkit, we have provided a little more information about collaboration with collateral organizations like the Builders Association in your area, or the National Association of Home Builders, BIA, CSI, and so forth, and green organizations, sustainable organizations, solar groups, all sorts of things. Both of these, and we provide an introduction to working with insurance. Both of these topics are important at all stages, but especially during recovery and rebuilding. Architects need to understand better how to make this work, and components can also help members be aware of the importance of their involvement in construction administration to protect property owner funds and resources. After a disaster comes to town, it brings a lot of money to the table and some significant fraud ensues. So I provide this example here because I want you to understand that when a $500,000 house is burnt up to a crisp and gone, the insurance usually has funds for the structure that was, they call it the house that was, and then additional funds for replacement costs building in a surge economy, and additional costs for building code upgrades, and additional costs for a little bit of the landscaping and so forth. So that, for that $500,000 house in this example with this particular insurance company, $825,000 is on the table to rebuild the structure. That's a pretty nice amount. And then this policy also provided for $350,000 of personal property insurance. Now, altogether, that adds up to $1,275,000. Then there's some additional monies for debris removal and for the additional living expenses or loss of use if it was rental. On the right, on these charts that I make for people, I also put kind of the low and high end of the cost of rebuilding the home that they want to build, and I try to equate that to the square footage and the going rates of construction. So it's just a very generic estimate. But I want you to notice that soft costs are included here, and that can vary on the project, but I put a sizable amount because all those pre-construction services that have to be done, plus architect fees and engineering fees and green fees and all the things that have to happen to get the house back. So it can cost up to $1.2 to $1.5 million to rebuild that $500,000 house, and then they also have to design and furnish the interior. So sometimes you're using all of the personal property money for the house because of the surge economy and because of the new and additional requirements, or maybe the insurance was a little bit low to start with and the house was old, it was depreciated, and they're getting back a new house. So just be mindful when you're doing these projects to keep, the architects need to be mindful when they're doing these projects to keep the cost of the project reasonable. It has to be the same kind size of house as before. It can't be, we had a little shoebox and now we have a Frank Gehry masterpiece. So unless the person is independently wealthy. Rebuilding simple workforce housing with solar and with mindful landscaping can also provide opportunities for innovation and design. This small home is still garage forward in the workforce neighborhood due to the size of the lot, but it demonstrates many resilience features like keeping the vegetation away from the building, enclosed eaves, and hardened materials. Review. After the peak of activity of the disaster has passed and the real statistics can be gathered, the component can take a moment to review all that has transpired. Components can track the success of members' efforts and celebrate their successes by sharing with AIA California, sharing with the Disaster Area Network, preparing case studies, and with community outreach such as exhibits of innovative rebuilds, competitions, and media spots highlighting architect successes. In addition to the forms and other materials in the resources section, there are various case studies which give more information about specific disaster. In the review section, we have general instructions about what to include in your case study, and those are included in this section of the toolkit. Each component faces a different set of challenges, so it is super helpful to go through this process of reviewing what has been accomplished and creating a case study. The time frame for each disaster varies, especially the length of rebuilding. Reviewing the progress periodically and making note of the areas where architects facilitated streamlining, innovation, advocacy, and maximizing the rebuild statistics are critical elements to component success. Advertising, design awards, exhibits, and media can help communicate to the community where and how architects helped build back better. There are various resources in the last section of the toolkit, and this will probably grow over time. If you have something that can be useful to others for the resources section, please let us know. Here's a list of some of the key links and resources in this last section of the toolkit. These include the forms, waivers, and templates, the architectshelp.org resources, links to AIA National Disaster Assistant Program and Handbook, AIA National and AIA California Resilience and Disaster Response Committees, and various continuing education resource links. This is completed with the case studies, white papers, and so forth. AIA California is grateful for your time and attention. This is only the first year of the toolkit being rolled out and giving this training. We expect this document to be a living document that gets enhanced each year as it is used, with more resources, more case studies, and more evidence that architects really do help. If you have any feedback, what you would like to see included more, please let us know. This program qualifies for 1 hour of CEU HSW credits. Thank you for attending, and now we will have some Q&A.
Awesome. Julia, thank you so much. That was such a great presentation, really covering a lot of the key points of our component disaster response toolkit. I'm happy to move it over to Q&A. Folks on the call, this is a meeting. You should have the ability to raise your hand if you have questions, and I'd be happy to call on those that have their hands raised for their questions for Julia. Miriam, I see your hand up. You're muted. Oh, sorry, you're still muted. Let's see. I can ask you to unmute. Does that work? Oh, sorry. Oh,
You almost did it.
almost.
Try again.
There we go.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to tell you that I have studied at the university in Buenos Aires. So it's like I have sometimes like a different point of view, right? So I was talking to my friends and colleagues, and they were asking me, why are we still building in wood frame when we could be building in brick and even in concrete, as it was the example in San Francisco, because this is not due to the earthquakes. That was a political issue many years ago. Maybe you know about this company, Simon's company, who had the fabrication of bricks in Montebello, and the code was changed. So I know that if we add rebars and we change the shape of the foundation, then we could have brick buildings or concrete buildings, and at least for some buildings, because if you see the aerial pictures or the drones, the pictures and the videos, you will see that all the chimneys are standing and still standing. So that's my question for you. And also the other question is regarding the, let's say the ecological point of view, because if everybody is going to rebuild the same, I'm thinking that maybe in the future we will have the same problem, right? And I understand that this is not possible because every lot is it has a different owner, and we have the insurance companies as well that do not allow the change of codes. But I was thinking if it would be possible maybe to expropriate some lots and have like a more ecological impact on the places. You understand, right? I mean, it should be changed. Something has to be changed, not to do the same all over again. That's my question.
Okay. Well, thank you for two good questions. So regarding masonry, of course, there's a lot of options after a disaster like this for people to consider. And in my neighborhood, in my community, people came with ideas about using SAP, which was foam sandwiched in OSB panels. And I thought that's pretty flammable and meltable. So why would you do that after, this area can burn down? So I take your question to heart, but I think the reason why people are building with wood in the United States is because we have a lot of timber and because it's affordable. And especially in California, we have huge trees and huge forestry operations. And masonry construction is a lot different. It's very prevalent in Europe and South America, maybe because of different situations. But here in the US, it would be much more expensive to build homes with masonry, is my understanding. However, that doesn't mean that we can't harden the homes and make them more resistant. So there's a lot of examples in the LA fires where certain homes are still standing because they adopted the WUI things. So that code took 16 years to change, where Julia Morgan changed code in 4 months, but now it takes 16 years to change the code. So it's a iterative process in the US, changing codes and bringing them forward. Maybe we can accelerate that. I think in one of the calls with LA, there was an interest in building less toxically in order to make cleanup better, but there's so many consumer products that contribute to that equation. So it's a very good question to consider. Also, the ecological question is like, expropriating lots is kind of a challenge. I was a planning commissioner when I was younger, and we had a subdivision that had been cut into squares, but the landscape was like this. So no one had fit roads and septic systems into this huge subdivision. We had to get all of the community members to put their lot ownership into a lottery and then redraw the whole neighborhood like 50 years after it was platted, and then redo it. It was a huge process getting all the neighbors to agree to this, and then to engage in a lottery to get a new lot back for themselves. So it's really not easy to undo planning and redo planning, especially when people's homes are on the line. So managed retreat is an idea that everyone's talking about, especially for sea level rise, but it's also important for wildland urban interface. But right now, if we don't have the political will to tell people they can't rebuild back on their lot, and if you let one person rebuild, you've really got to let other people, because otherwise people are out there all by themselves. So and not every house in the wildland urban interface burns. So like in Malibu, there was a lot of skipping back in 2018, 2019, whenever that fire happened. So there was a lot of skipping as the winds whipped around and took the fire different places. So some houses burnt, some houses didn't, and it didn't even have to do with the materials, it had to do with wind patterns. So I don't know if that answers all of your questions, but expropriating people's property may happen at some point, but that's going to take a huge amount of political will. And masonry construction is just expensive in the US.
Yeah, one more thing, please. I have read that the lumber is imported from Canada. So suppose that we have this tariff of 25%, so it becomes very expensive as well. Just
Well,
asking, okay?
that's not a topic that I'm an expert on, where all the lumber comes from in North America, and where it's going to. So, I mean, maybe somebody else can answer that question at another time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Stephanie?
Hi, Julia. Thank you so much for this. It's always a pleasure to see you. I have a few questions. Thank you for answering about managed retreat. We can talk about that more at another time. I'm curious in the examples that you've experienced and also participated in, how has the architecture profession had an impact on infrastructure improvement? Has the city county been able to achieve infrastructure improvement, undergrounding, all the electrical, for example, widening roads, two ways in and out for more resilient and sustainable futures for those communities?
Well, we had a lot of experience with that in Sonoma County. For example, that Larkfield Estates that I showed, the one HOA was to the north, it was connected to sewer, and Larkfield Estates on the larger lots was not. And the county had to go through a process with that whole neighborhood, and it slowed them down as well to consider getting them onto the sewer system. It would have cost about $75,000 per lot, and there was no money to pay that anywhere. So 140 homes, $75,000 per lot, they preferred to be back on their septic system. So that one didn't work. But I know that in Coffee Park, they did redo some of the infrastructure. A lot of the pipes, even underground, melted. So pipes that weren't deep enough had to be redone, especially at lot lines into the house. So a lot of times anything inside the boundary of the house was high enough that it was melting. So that had to be redone for most people. And in some areas we had a melted plastic problem in the water supply, and that took about a year or two to solve. And I know that PG&E, after all these fires that we had in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and still has adopted a serious effort to underground power lines. When I lived in Colorado, the snow could be so deep that all power lines were undergrounded. There was nothing above ground, but it added hugely to the cost of construction. So other infrastructure that might be affected, well, obviously the planning can't be redone unless there's some political will to have a mechanism to have a change in planning at the moment of the disaster. It's very hard to do because so many people their life savings is their house. And if you don't let them rebuild it right away, they could lose half of their insurance money. I didn't really explain that, but if people don't rebuild, they may walk away with only half of the insurance money. So half of that money gets paid out in the beginning. The insurance companies are banking on you not rebuilding because they get to show profit if they don't dole out all the money. They have huge reserves. They dump it out on a table and they give half of it away as they're required to do. But then they get greedy and try to hold on to as much as possible, because in our fire, State Farm's profits were off the charts because they were not paying out this pile of money. They were holding on to it. They want people to lose hope. So it's really important that we help people have hope and we help them recover their buildings. So there may be mechanisms down the road where we can change how that works. But right now, there's not a lot of mechanism in place to replat, rezone, change density, manage retreat, at least in California at this time. It certainly is a question on the table.
And did you find that you and the architects you were organized with had a role in those early stages of infrastructure improvement and potential improvement for planning in these neighborhoods?
Well, yes, we were at the table for sure because I was the disaster recovery chair, so I got invited to a lot of different kinds of meetings. I was at all those septic meetings for Larkfield Estates. We had some other people who served on the Coffee Park committee because they They were architects who lived in the neighborhood. I was kind of excluded because after I made that map and I told this one guy, you should be mayor of Coffee Park, and he did become mayor of Coffee Park, and he is now a city council member. He ran these meetings and he took it so seriously. And but they tried to keep architects at an arm's distance so that people could have their kind of private industry relationships outside of the community organizing. They were very private about it with their Facebook pages and so forth. So, but definitely the architects who were at the table did play a role in trying to improve the infrastructure. Because while all the houses are down, why not tear up the roads and fix this and that? So, I think Stephanie had a question too. Stephanie Poole.
Yeah, I did. I had a question about some of these communities that were developed by HOAs and had production housing with only one or two model type of houses. When they were rebuilt and the architects had to bring them up to the new codes, were the designs changed as well? Or did they stick with the original designs or did they change them and like, did everyone get to change and make them unique? Or did they have to go back to that original 1970s Mike Brady house?
I'm just going to share this image just because this is Altadena right now. This map is called the RESA map. So you can go and find it. It's RESA. It's called the RESA map. It's they do a picture of every house that's down, gets a red dot, and if it's yellow, that means it's only a partial destruction. So you can see most of Altadena in those areas is down. This is the Palisades part of it. So it's going to be an important issue for LA. But so when I showed you the Larkfield and the Wickiup neighborhoods, the Wickiup one was the HOA one, and of course they wanted them to have a similar appearance, but it wasn't all cookie cutter. So the 80 that were done by Stonefield were 5 plans and 3 elevation styles. People couldn't deviate because they were building 80 homes. You know, they had to keep it moving to meet any kind of time frame that was reasonable. But the people who weren't in those 80 or however many, maybe 88, I can't remember. But the other people were allowed to explore and do slightly different plans, add solar, add this, add that. But the HOA still got to review them. So the people who went with Stonefield got the kind of normal developer type production house, and they got to choose their interior finishes. And the other people had a little bit more adventurous time. A few of those ended up subject to fraud, and there was a contractor from the valley that came in and took a lot of huge deposits from people, and then just walked away with the money.
But those are contractor driven designs, not architect driven designs, correct?
No. Those people would get architects. And you know that, like here you could see down here in this lower area there was a different design, and these well, Palisades houses were all pretty nice, but different builders, different times and stuff like that. But the people who were like all in Larkfield all got separate architects and contractors. And sometimes people hired a contractor who hired a designer instead of an architect. That happens. But there's plenty of work to go around, and there's also plenty of commercial buildings down. We didn't talk about that too much today, but that's an important aspect of the recovery. There's a lot of work for architects. Most of the architects that I knew in my community only did drawings and said, I don't have time to do CA because I've got too much to do. And that was kind of where we ended up with some of these. We had some major fraud going on. So it's very important to be aware of that. But design innovation is what we all want. We want everybody to have better design, but not everybody cares about that. So we were lucky in Coffee Park that we were able to say a couple of words like, don't do garage forward, do front door forward houses. Simple things like that did make a difference. And even if, you know, that didn't become a contract for us, that person remembered that. And then their neighbors also remembered it, and things changed. Coffee Park's a far more interesting place now than it was before, because everything before was T111 siding, garage forward, 16-foot by 8-foot door. And yeah, it's much more fascinating now.
Thank you, Julia. It looks like we have one last question from Blair.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I just wanted to share my experience and kind of may help answer that last question too. We did some houses years back for Woolsey Fire, one in Malibu City proper and one outside of Malibu and unincorporated LA County. And in terms of staying within 110% eligibility, Malibu interpreted the bulk as being exactly 10% bigger than what was there. So you had to do a kind of cloud diagram around what was there before and then 10% bigger, whereas my planner in LA County didn't really care about the bulk, just said like, stay within that 10% of the height. I want to see a similar footprint, 10% bigger, but you can do whatever you want. You can do your architect thing within that box. So I don't know what's going to happen here. I'm very curious exactly how these different jurisdictions are going to interpret that that 10% bulk rule. But anyway, so I just thought I'd share my experience there.
That is an interesting rule in LA, and I did work the Woolsey Fire in Malibu when I was Vice President General Counsel for Homebound, and yeah, that was kind of interesting that everybody wanted bigger in Malibu. They all wanted to rebuild, and they wanted bigger and better. Of course, we always want people to design better. We always want to have everyone want better design, but not everyone wants that. And so when everyone owns individual lots and has different kinds of money situations, different kinds of insurance, they have different constraints. So we have to be mindful of that. And the bigger goal is to get as many people rebuilt as possible so that the landscape's not empty. It's not fun to live on a street where it's in construction for 10 years. And so that is like a big issue that everyone needs to consider.
Awesome. Thank you so much, first and foremost, to Julia for a really great training on the Component Disaster Response Toolkit. For everybody on the call, AIA California will work to get you submitted for learning units for today's program. Please allow a few extra days before that is reflected on your transcript. I will also be sending a follow-up email with some additional information on the resources and the presentation that was given today. So you will have access to that. Just again, allow some time before we can get all that organized in a nice link for you to have the information. Thank you again so much for our Component Disaster Response Toolkit training, and to Julia. And I hope everyone has a really great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Great presentation. Thank you.